Yeah, you just couldn't help yourself, could you, Cardinals? Everybody was about to have a nice, quiet Memorial Day weekend, and then you had to go and cut DeAndre Hopkins. This is why you don't score well on these NFLPA surveys, because of stuff like this, paying no attention to anybody's needs but your own. But now DeAndre Hopkins is out there, so we'll talk about it. I don't think the Texans should get excited about it because it's not in the cards for multiple reasons. But DeAndre Hopkins did mention 5 quarterbacks with whom he'd like to play when he was on the I Am Athlete podcast last week. They were Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and Patrick Mahomes. That's a pretty formidable list. He took the 5th when they asked him about Dak Prescott. Very interesting. But it's also worth mentioning that the New England Patriots did try to trade for him reportedly earlier this offseason, and they haven't made a lot of moves since that would suggest they don't need him anymore. So we're going to add that to the list of 6 teams that might be likely destinations for DeAndre Hopkins right now. I think there's one that's a very clear favorite and the most likely. I'll explain who that is at the end. But Buffalo Bills. Bills had interest early on. Since then, they've traded up for Dalton Kincaid, and I think they thought of him or thinking of Dalton Kincaid kind of like a third wide receiver. But that would be, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, DeAndre Hopkins, Dalton Kincaid. That would be a pretty juicy package offensively. Wish I hadn't said it that way. But it's I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's in the cards. I think that with the salary that DeAndre Hopkins is going to want, which is at least Odell Beckham Jr.'s salary of $15 million or so, the Bills right now are kind of up against it with the cap. And I don't think it's possible or easy for them to pull this off, even if they got creative and pushed some things off into the future. It's probably not in the cards for them right now. The LA Chargers also have limited cap space, and I know the cap is a myth and all this and all that, but when it comes to taking on an aging wide receiver who's been injured a lot, you got to be very careful about spending exorbitantly or leveraging yourself against the future with the cap. And they drafted Quentin Johnson, so with Quentin Johnson, who's gonna need his touches, need time to develop all of that, that might be too many mouths to feed. With Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, those guys already redid their contracts this offseason. So we talk about the cap and how it's difficult to manage these things. They managed the cap aggressively and creatively by restructuring those guys and pushing them off into the future, but that makes it a lot tougher to work in a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who has injury issues, because remember, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were both injured a bunch last year. And to get them on the field at the same time would have been awesome. They weren't able to do it, but I don't know if adding another injury-plagued wide receiver is the preferred method. If you're like, hey, if we get 3 guys and all 3 of them are expected to play 8 games apiece, at some point there you're going to have 16 games of 2 really good wide receivers. It feels too much like trying to cram 2 ball-dominant point guards out on the floor at the same time. I wouldn't know anything about that. It can work magnificently until a game 5 or so. Philadelphia Eagles. Look, they already have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, which is pretty damn good. But the Eagles have been aggressive in the past. They're known to sign a veteran who might be ring-chasing. I think the difference would be that DeAndre, compared to these other destinations, like, he would have to be taking a discount to go to a contender. Jalen Hurts just got paid. And I think if you don't pay DeAndre Hopkins to be your 3rd wide receiver when you just got beat by a team that had Kadarius Toney as their 3rd wide receiver, if you're also paying a quarterback more money than Patrick Mahomes. Does that make sense? Like, the Chiefs right now, they have a quarterback who's about to be the 9th highest paid quarterback in the league. And they had Kadarius Toney be an integral part of their Super Bowl effort, of their win against the Eagles. So the Eagles, if they just paid Jalen Hurts, man, he's got to be worth that money. And bringing on DeAndre Hopkins, it can only be at a discount. So I don't think that's anything that DeAndre does, unless that's truly what he's after and what he wants. But I think it would have to be a pretty big discount, and not necessarily what DeAndre would be into right now. I'm skeptical of that. The Kansas City Chiefs, speak of the devil, $650,000. What's that, Seth? Is that the minimum salary these days for like a 7th-round pick or something absurd or ludicrous like that? No. That's the amount of cap space the Kansas City Chiefs have right now. $650,000. But they do have cap space next year. So Chris Jones, the defensive tackle, could clear up a lot of space by redoing his deal if he gets a new deal this offseason, which I'm guessing is going to happen. And if they just go ahead and do that as part of bringing DeAndre Hopkins in, they could make it work. But again, look, everything is all kumbaya right now, and Patrick Mahomes is saying all the right stuff about how, no, I don't care that I'm going to be the 9th highest paid quarterback in the league. It's all cool, even though I'm like 10 times better than any of those guys. They got to be mindful of that. And I don't think, again, they just won a Super Bowl after bringing Kadarius Toney in and having him be an integral part of the playoffs. So I don't think that they're in a position where they're really going to be, desperately seeking out a really high salary or paying a high salary for DeAndre Hopkins. So unless DeAndre Hopkins wants to take a pay cut, which maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I think DeAndre feels like he's got a lot of years left in him. I think he's got the Anquan Bolden trajectory in mind. Should be interesting if you think about the Baltimore Ravens, which, did we skip the Ravens? I skipped the Ravens, didn't I? God. They already added Odell Beckham Jr. This is the problem. DeAndre Hopkins is partly one of the reasons he wasn't really eager to restructure his contract to enable a trade, most likely, was that he saw this money that Odell Beckham Jr. got. And DeAndre is way more relevant, way more in his prime than Odell Beckham Jr. right now, but Odell Beckham Jr. got that money. So the Ravens, unfortunately for them, they already spent their Odell Beckham Jr. money on Odell Beckham Jr. If DeAndre Hopkins wants to go get Odell Beckham Jr. money, he's going to go to somebody who hasn't already spent their Odell Beckham Jr. money anyway. They also, Nelson Aguilar, that's right, Zay Flowers. I think that ship has sailed with the Baltimore Ravens, which leaves us really with the Patriots. And I got to tell you, it just makes too much sense. I know what the objection is going to be. I hear you loud and clear. I'll get to that. But the Patriots don't have a ton of cap space right now. You know what they do have? They've got a ton of cap space in 2024. They are just second to the Houston Texans in cap space for 2024. So they don't even have to get all that creative when it comes to pushing money off into the future. They've got oodles and oodles of cap space to either work with veterans or work with DeAndre on a contract that has a bunch of money pushed off into the future. So I think the cap is not an issue. Mac Jones needing receivers to find out what he can or cannot do so they can make a decision on Mac Jones. And then Bill O'Brien having some tools to work with, which brings up the obvious question. Hey, wait a second. Don't I remember something vaguely happening between Bill O'Brien and DeAndre Hopkins way back when? Yeah. Reportedly, they did not get along. According to Michael Irvin, it was not a nice conversation that Bill O'Brien had with DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins, for what it's worth, denied politely, very politely, Michael Irvin's report back at the time, or at least said that it wasn't quite right. So DeAndre's never come out and, just publicly lambasted Bill O'Brien or anything. We know from uncomfortable conversations between Bill Belichick and DeAndre Hopkins when one of them was mic'd up. Two guys that I don't think are masters of the conversational arts, awkwardly exchanging compliments with each other on the sideline. They have a mutual admiration for each other. And at the end of the day, look, Bill O'Brien knows what DeAndre Hopkins can do. I think he might relish the opportunity to have DeAndre Hopkins under the thumb of Bill Belichick instead of under the tinier, less forceful and powerful and influential thumb of Bill O'Brien. That maybe Big Thumb will be more effective than Little Thumb in getting Big Hands Hopkins to do what Bill O'Brien wants to do. But plus, look, if you guys never watched cable television, in Game of Thrones, Sopranos, lovers become enemies, enemies become friends. People who once tried to assassinate you become your greatest ally. And I think we might be at that moment. We might be in season 4 of a really, really, really good HBO series where DeAndre Hopkins and Bill O'Brien realize that though they might not like it, and though they may detest each other, by combining forces, they can defeat their mutual enemy, which for those two, I don't know, is probably puppies or something like that. So I'm sorry to break it to everybody else in the rest of the league, but DeAndre Hopkins probably sometime by the time I finish editing this video is going to be in New England. So have a nice Memorial Day weekend. The saga continues.